This video will be philosophizing on self-exploratory feelings as it pertains to distinctions within the overarching subcomponent personality characteristics, sensation-seeking, and/or tastefulness, and/or curiousness. Each meaningful to engage more meaningful aesthetic feelings related to intuitive gut feelings, meaningful to navigate the self in relation to certain distinct self-preferential evaluations, meaningful to explore certain intrinsic processes and or intrinsic properties, most related to certain relevant and or appropriate and or meaningful underlying psychological need satisfactions. Tastefulness most is associated with the unique sensitivity to one's personal tastes and or distastes to appropriately navigate what one tends to prefer in relation to certain flavorings and or texturings and or other qualitative characteristic qualities that are meaningful to identify and or elaborate in order to optimize certain repeated aesthetic experiences one often engages more meaningful pursuits of. The opposite polarity being distastefulness, most associated with, even within the individual who may prefer certain tastes, may experience more dissatisfaction even within those tastes, claiming others have ruined their experiences, ultimately associated with certain perceptions of dissatisfaction and or distastefulness that are deprived of certain sensitivity to the aesthetic experiences, yet are more related to failing to navigate one's own personal feelings appropriately and tend to avoid emotion-focused coping. Individuals who have better emotion-focused coping skills, ironically, are more likely to experience more tastefulness within their experiences and are more sensitive to what they prefer and also what they don't prefer, whom are more tolerant of their preferences and also of others whom may hold distinct preferences that are most related to tastefulness. Compared to curiousness, not to be conflated with philosophical curiosity. Curiousness within self-exploratory feelings uniquely pertains to affective curiosity, meaning the feelings that one experiences that motivate the intuition to explore, and that's positively associated with intellect, yet it's mostly related to one's aesthetic feelings, meaning that one is more likely to engage certain affective curiosities within aesthetic experiences that arouses one's curiosity to explore. The opposite polarity of curiousness is dimness. These are individuals who may have difficulty experiencing the same desire to explore new and or different and or original distinct component parts within also what's different in the aesthetic experiences, who may be confused as to explain what it is that others are experiencing and or engage more compassionate thinking to understand and or appreciate another's perspectives in terms of exploring certain unique aesthetic experiences, and who may think the other individual is, in many cases, engaging in what's terrifying to that individual and or elicits a feeling of trepidation, desiring to avoid that individual who is less, in this case, within what one thinks is comfortable, exploring the new and or original and or distinct components of the internal and or external environment that is more likely to elicit feelings of threat associated with dimness, lacking the depth of perception, engaging more deeper perspectival thinking processes, instead whom are more engaging shallow processing and whom maybe more confused and or experience fear instead of desiring to explore deeper various more unique properties and or unique processes within the internal and or external environment. Compared to sensation seeking, the opposite polarity being blandness, meaning individuals whom are higher in sensation seeking are more likely to explore distinct texturings and or flavorings and or distinct sensory stimulations, not necessarily always within one's taste per se, yet is often what one desires to explore and engages certain affective curiosity and or in many cases maybe what is merely unusual and or unknown to the self, whom may be higher in a need for cognition in order to fill in gaps in meaningful information, that's more likely to, within current to future oriented navigations, allowance and or disallowance the cultivation of self-knowledge and or self-awareness appropriate to more meaningfully satisfy certain relevant and or appropriate and or meaningful underlying essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs that are meaningful to the self, with the appropriate categoricalizations of what constitutes what's within one's tastes and or distastes, engaging more the curiosity to approach and or the self-knowledge or self-awareness to approach more from safe distances what is harmful to the self, meaning individuals whom are higher in sensation seeking are more engaging the calibratory sensory explorations that are meaningful to cultivate, in many cases, more wisdom related to intellect, not necessarily experience more positive, meaningful emotions per se, yet positive, meaningful emotions tend to be directly and or indirectly positively related to one's sensation seeking. However, it's the intellect that's more related to sensation seeking, that's more likely to be repeated in terms of certain explorations one desires to meaningfully engage, meaning that the pressures on sensation seeking are more likely associated with one's intelligence and or intellectual ability to cultivate more self-knowledge and or self-awareness that optimizes navigational wisdom, engaging the executive functioning that's more likely to elicit the release of dopamine in terms of processing errors and or correcting those errors to optimize the benefits one is more likely to experientially encounter in terms of one's self-preferential evaluations of certain risks and or benefits, engaging that executive functioning process that's meaningful for certain relevant and or appropriate and or meaningful essential and or necessitated underlying psychological needs, optimizing healthy psychological functioning and or positive psychological well-being, including positive subjective well-being, optimizing most meaningfully meaning in life and or individual autonomy and or competence within one's positive subjective well-being that is most experientially encountered within the self, engaging more this perspectival process within one's subjectivity, not necessarily within the mind-body connections that are being transformed from one's self-preferential evaluations, from the self-causations one is navigating. That's all I want to say for this video. Hope you have an awesome one. Human up to that.